We want to just note that Joni and her husband Freddie Tansky were blessed with another great-grandson, Menachem Mendel Porter, and our classmate Goldie Baumgarten. I'll always call her Katzman in my head. Goldie Baumgarten was blessed with another Anikel, a little girl Razel, to her daughter Miro and her husband Yankel Rosenblum. There should only be simchas for everyone, and the Eibusher should just send all the Yeshuas and Achamas, the Refuas, for everyone that needs it. We are learning on the Pasuk and Rashi in our Parsha, Kedoshim. It's Perek Yotes, Pasuk Chaf Gimel. So if you want to... Perek Yotes, Pasuk Chaf Gimel. Sorry, I was open to the wrong place. Okay, the pasuk reads, "V'chsavayu ela aretz," when you will come to the land of Eretz Yisrael, unitatem kol eitz ma'achal, and you'll plant any kind of fruit-bearing tree. Va'araltem orlasai, and you shall seal off its fruit as sealed off forbidden produce. And note the shirish is the same as an orel, as somebody who is not circumcised, right? Because circumcision is the removal of an impediment of something that is causing an obstruction or a seal. So these fruits will be sealed off, forbidden. And that, sorry, I should have read it differently. Ba'araltem arlasei piryai, and you shall seal off its fruit as sealed off forbidden produce. Shalosh shanim yelachem arelim lo yechel. It shall remain for you as sealed off forbidden produce for 3 years and must not be eaten. And we're looking at Rashi on the words shalosh shanim yelachem arelim. It's the third and the last of Rashi's comments on this pasuk. And Rashi says, "Me'e masai meinela." From when does one count the 3 years? And he answers, "Mishas nitiyasai," from the time of planting. Yachal, I might have thought, imitzniai, if he put the fruit aside, if he stored the fruit, la'achar shalosh shanim yeh mutar, that after 3 years the fruit will be permitted. Talmud Laimar, so the pasuk teaches no. From the word yihya, that's the fifth to the last word of the pasuk, shalosh shanim yeh lachem, from the word yihya, Rashi says this teaches us, Bahavayasa yehe, it shall remain in its original state. That's Rashi. Now let's go to the second paragraph in the Sikha. Ubiaru Mefarshim, and the Mefarshim explain, Shakavanasai, that the intention of Rashi, Lilamdenu Bazet, to teach us with the Sheminish Leishanim Elu Enu Enoi Mishash Pri, that we don't start counting the 3 years from when the tree starts giving fruit. Ella Mishas Nitiasai, we count the 3 years from its planting. V'zayis Yalpinon B'dichsiv Vinatatem, and this we learn out from the word Vinatatem, and you shall plant. Loimar Dimishas Nitia Mainim, the word Vinatatem teaches us that from when you do the planting, that's when you start to count. Okay. B'tzarech lahavin, we have to understand. Aleph, im kol ha'hechrach shemaynu le'mishas netiyasei hu mitebes vinatatem, if the whole reason that we can say with authority that you count from when you plant the tree is based on the word vinatatem, and you shall plant, so Rashi should have put this word in the Dibra Maschil. Okay, this is in consonance with the Rebbe's continuous underscoring that the Dibra HaMaschil, that the words that Rashi comments on and he brings at the beginning, that the words that he brings at the beginning are not just to tell you generally what he wants to comment on, but are actually part of his explanation and are extremely important. And so if the whole limud, if the whole proof that we count from when you start to plant is from the word vinatatem, why is that word not in the Dibra HaMaskil? Hasha'elav gedola mizu. Question is actually even larger. Mokar perzehu b'teres kahanim. The source for Rashi's teaching is in Teres Kahanim, that is the Medrash on Chumash Vayikra. Visham, and in Teres Kahanim there, Achemuvo limud ze behemshech l'drashas al vinatatem. And in Teres Kahanim, in fact, this information is imparted under the word vinatatem. Aval Rashi shina miteres kahanim, but Rashi diverges from what Teres Kahanim does, vehevia, and brings the same information ala teva shalosh shanim yelachem arelim. He brings the same limud on the words for 3 years. This fruit shall be sealed off from you. Mibli lahaskir klal tevas vinatatem, and he doesn't at all include the word vinatatem. Okay, so we have to understand that. Why does he do that? Beis, leloi tevas vinatatem, but more profoundly, without the word vinatatem in the pasuk, so where, in fact, does Rashi find the basis for his contention that you count from when you plant? And he rebuffs the thought that it would be gimel shanim misha sha'isa pri, that it would be 3 years from when the tree starts giving forth fruit. If he's not basing it on vinatatem, what is he basing this on? So question number 1 is, why is it not in the Dibra Maskil? In the Medrash, that is the Dibra Maskil. Here it's not, very clearly so. More profoundly, if you take the word vinatatem out of the equation, as it were, then what's he basing his assertion on? And Gimel, ma tam ha'arichus b'loshen Rashi. And why is Rashi so verbose here, so elongated? Hein b'ha'takam in a pasuk, both in the words that he highlights in the Dibra HaMaskil, that he cites from the pasuk, the hein bil shoinai, and also in his explanation that follows. For instance, he starts with me'ei masai mainelai. From when does a person start to count the 3 years? He could have written very succinctly, just don't start with a question, just say, shalosh shanim, you count 3 years, mishas nitiasai, from when you plant. Just give us the information. Why begin with a question? And although if you look at the Medrash, that's exactly what the Medrash does. The Medrash says that question, Hari Commission is bar kamapamim, ein in yonei shel Rashi b'pirushay alatar lahatik drashas azal bil shainan. But we've already explained many times, it's not Rashi's style. It's not his MO to simply cite explanations from the Medrash in its exact verbiage. Ella lefarish pshut shel mikra. Rashi's stated mandate is to teach us pshuta shel mikra v'lachein darker l'shanes l'reiv. In the main, Rashi actually does tweak what he takes from a Medrash. He changes it. He deletes certain words. He might add certain words. He might change the order of how he brings it from the Medrash. He makes it his own. Upshite lahashmid milashon razal, and he definitely deletes certain things. And he does this in alignment with what he understands is the Pshuta Shel Mikra. So why so verbose? Why so many words here? Why spill so much ink? Yes, it's true, but that's how it appears in Teres Kahanim, but that never stopped Rashi from changing it. So why in this case? Beis, Seif Beis, Va'bir Bazeh, and the explanation of this is as follows. Bepashtos, simply speaking, Masha Huksha L'Rashi, what is bothering Rashi? What's bothering Rashi is Arichas Haloshin Bepasuk Shalei Shanim Yelachem Arelim. What bothers Rashi is what seem to be redundant, extraneous words in the pasuk itself. So if you go back to the pasuk and you read with me, it says, when you come to the land, unitatem kol eitz machal, and when you plant fruit-bearing trees, va'araltem or lasoi es piryei shaloi shanim, and you will consider its fruit as sealed off or stopped off or unavailable for 3 years. What's with the last 3 words of the pasuk? Arelim lo ye'echel. Who needs that? That is already the content of what has been conveyed earlier. Now let's look into the Sikha. Sorry, somebody want to ask something?
I was going to say, but the way the pasuk is written, you're supposed to stop at arlaso es piryoi, and shaloi shanim yelechem arelim lo yechal. That's like part of the. It doesn't go with the first part of that the pasuk. The pasuk stops like comma shaloi shanim yelechem arelim lo yechal.
Okay, so I hear you. I hear you, but it still seems redundant. Look, the Rebbe says like that. I like it already says in the pasuk before this, "Va'araltem or lasay es period." It already tells us that this is unavailable to you. We don't need the last 3 words to tell us yet again that it's unavailable to us. That's the redundancy. I understand what you're saying, Elisheva, but could have easily said,
definitely.
Here, the Rebbe says, that's it. It's elegant, it's succinct, and you don't need the extra words. Rashi. So from this, Rashi learns out, Sheba'orla beis inyanim, that the pasuk has to bring the reference to this fruit being unavailable, stopped up, impeded, whatever term you want to use, because there's actually 2 inyanim, there are 2 facets. There's 2 aspects to orla. And what are those? Aleph, there's Isser orla ala eitz, the haperes. There is the prohibition on the tree and its fruit. And this is in halachic terminology called chefza. That is the item that is being discussed here. Va'araltem arlasai es piryoi, ubelashon Rashi, and on the words es piryoi, Rashi says, ye atum v'nistam milehanois mimenu. It's going to be sealed off and closed up from you having pleasure from it. That's the chefza aspect. And then minyan hashloi shanim, then the fact that it doubles over comes to give us a din ala adam. It comes to tell us that the shaloi shanim of when it's not available to you is connected to the second facet of the mitzvah, which is the gavra, the person who is doing the mitzvah. And that is underscored in the words, shaloi shanim yeh lachem arelim. It will be unavailable, it will be stopped up, it will be impeded from you. V'zois barashi levayer barichas l'shainai. And now we understand why Rashi seems to be using extraneous, superfluous words. But not when you understand, as the Rebbe explains to us, that there's 2 inyanim going on here. That each time the Torah references that it is unavailable, that is arla, it parallels one of the 2 aspects. The first is the chefza, the item. The second is the gavra, the person who has this injunction put on them. And Rashi comes to underscore this by asking, Me'e masai moinelai mishas niti asai. From when does the person count? He does so from the time of a planting. Meaning, ha'adam tzarech liyes moinelai es hashalosh shanim. The Torah is underscoring that the person has to count 3 years. The chayvon shahaminyan hu lachem, and because the counting belongs to you, mistaber shahashalashanim nimnin loy misha sha'etz eisaperes. Not, you don't count the 3 years for when the tree gives forth fruit, ella mipiulas adam, but rather from the person's action, from the person's overture, underscoring the gavra aspect, the person, vinatatem, from when you planted, misha sheha adam nata es ha'etz, from the time that the person planted the tree. And the Rebbe says that once we establish this, once we understand this, there is a difference that emerges. Because now that we understand what the pasuk means based on what we understand Rashi is telling us, because you count from when you plant, and the count has to be to you, nimtza l'chayra, so we find seemingly shahashalish shanim mishas hanatia ein nimnin lefi ha'etz ella lefi ha'adam lachem. So the years are not counted based on the tree, but they're counted based on the person. Now, what would that mean, practically speaking? So the Rebbe says as follows: "V'achiluk shabein beis ha'ifanim," and the difference practically would be im moinim es hashalish shanu lefi ha'etz or lefi netias ha'adam. The difference in counting based on the tree or based on the person who b'mikra shel netias anaf me'etz shekvar malu lo shanim. The difference would be in counting a graft, when you take part of the tree and you take it off, and then you replant it to graft a new tree. So the difference would be if you take it from a tree that has already been planted 3 years earlier, okay, and it's giving fruit. So Arla has passed, we're good. But now you take off a branch to do a graft. Do you have to wait another 3 years? So the Rebbe says like this: if we were counting based on the tree, mutar miyad. If we're going based on the tree, then it would be simple. We would say, this is a graft from a tree that has already passed 3 years from when it was planted. So it's mutar. So anything that grows from this graft is now permissible. It's already done its orla time. But if the 3 years are being counted from when the person planted, lachem, from the word lachem, so then seemingly you have to start counting again from when you took this branch and you grafted it and you create a new tree. Misha adam nata es netiyasei hakadasha, from when the person did this new planting. Ulafizeh, in the brackets, and based on this, shitas Rashi bepeirushay alatera al derech hapshat. So the Rebbe shows us how Rashi's perush on the Torah, which is pshat, oile bekona echad im chelek halacha shebetera, aligns perfectly with halacha. The hetem ladin she'echad haneteya ve'echad hamavrich chulei chayav be'orla. The halacha says that one who plants a tree or one who grafts a tree, in both cases you have the imperative to wait 3 years as per the halacha of Orla. Okay, so now the Rebbe has explained how to read this Rashi in a completely new way. Again and again, I wonder, did Rashi know what he was doing here? Or was it simply in of Ruach HaKodesh? Or is it like the story with Rabbi Akiva and Moshe Rabbeinu? And Moshe saying, wait, I didn't know that. But Rabbi Akiva saying that he learned this from, Tile Halacha and Talach Moshe Messinai. Anyway, I don't know. Gimel. Al pizeh yuvan oid inin beperish Rashi zeh. Now, based on what the Rebbe taught us so far, we'll understand another inyan in this Rashi. Echad devorav. I'm sorry, achar devorav. After he says the words, "Me masay meina la mishas nitiasai." From when do you count? Right? He asks the question, "For when do you count?" From when you plant. Meisif Rashi ba'oisay dibor. He goes on, and he continues, and he says, "Yachol." You might think imitznioi, that if you put the fruit away, you put it aside, you squirreled it away. I don't know, you dried it, whatever. After 3 years of putting it aside, it will be permissible for you to enjoy. Talmud Laimar, the Torah is teaching us, it remains in its original state, which is that fruit that grow within 3 years of when you plant it are forbidden. There's no statute of limitations. Vitzarach lahaven. We have to understand. L'chayra beis in Yanush Perish Rashi Aleph Meina Lo Mishas Nitiyasayim Beis Yachal Imitzniyoy Eilem Sheichas Elazeh. Seemingly, these two things that Rashi is teaching are two disparate ideas. One is that you have to count from when you plant it, not from when the tree starts giving fruit. That's one thing. And the second piece of information is that it's not like after 3 years pass, you can then use the fruit that grows during the 3 years. It's two different things. The imkain, and if they're two different teachings, Haya Rashi Lachalik is based on Yanam Halalu, based Diborim Nifradim, Kedarka Bekama Mekaimes. And since they're two different things, we would think that Rashi would have divided them into different commentary, as he does, as is his style. The lama heviam behemshech echad ba'isay dibor. So why does he bring them in one fell swoop, under the same heading, under the same dibor maskil? Hatzmiya av gedola mizu, and the wonder is even greater. Gam mokar inyan zeh yachol lemitzniach chulei shebeperish Rashi hu b'taris kahanim. This second thing that Rashi is teaching about if you put the fruit aside, that after 3 years, it's still going to be forbidden. This also is found in Teres Kahanim. It's found in the Medrash. But in the Medrash, it does not follow the first limud. It's treated separately. V'imkein madua shina Rashi min Teres Kahanim b'tzirif is basically mudim yachad. So why again does Rashi diverge from what the Medrash does? And here he puts them together as opposed to treating them under two different headings. But the Rebbe says in Siv Dalid, va'al pi hanal, and Siv Beis harei muvah mepashtos. But once you understand what we explained above, basically the Rebbe says, once you understand the big chidush that I have unfurled for you here, now this just flows from that. Because once we understand that the seemingly superfluous words, which include the word lachem, come to teach us that it's not just an Indian of chefza, it's not just about the tree, but it's an Indian of gavra, it's when you planted it. Rak bekesher lefarit leprat dishloi shanim shahamini tzarich liyes lachem kenal el shebechlalos iser orlahu rak lachem iser gavra. Because you might have thought that it's only iser on the gavra. Let's go through the parentheses now. And the words, it should be to you, inaccessible or stopped up. They're not coming to teach you something new. The din b'minhag gimel shanim b'vad, in the halacha of how you count the 3 years. Elahain peirushan bi'uran. But rather, the second time that the pasuk brings down that it's arelim to you is just coming to further amplify what it said earlier. You might think that it's only Isser Gavra. And if you would have learned the pasuk like that, then you would have said that there's no isser on the peres. The isser is on the person. It's a isser on the gavra, not on the chefza. The ena ela isser ala adam shelo yilacholas haperes begimel hashanim harishonos. And the isser is that the person shouldn't eat the fruit in the first 3 years. Then yesh makam loimar. In that case, there would have been room to understand shala'achar shekalu gimel shanim, that after 3 years have passed, shuv lecha isa arla. Now there is no longer the prohibition of arla on the fruit. Afilu loyla perish tzamchu b'meshach gimel shnei arla, and there is no prohibition even on the fruit that grew during the 3 years. In other words, there are mitzvahs that only have imperative based on a chefza. Example would be tzitzis. In truth, you only need to wear tzitzis if you wear a 4-corner garment. So what do Yarei Shamayim do? They create a 4-corner garment so they can keep this very great mitzvah. But the mitzvah is on the chefza, not on the gavra, which is why there are so many people walking around who are otherwise observant without tzitzis. Whole different subject, but I'm just giving an example, okay? So the Rebbe says that sometimes you have a mitzvah that's on the gavra, sometimes you have a mitzvah that's on the chefza, sometimes you have a mitzvah that's on both. And the Rebbe's chiddush here is that Rashi is explaining to us that there is an imperative on both the gavra and the chefza. And that's why he puts both perushim under one koteret, under one heading, under one dibar maschil, because that's his whole working thesis here. That the seemingly superfluous words in the pasuk are not at all superfluous. Each one of those 2 terms speaks to another dimension of these 2 dimensions. Now, if you wouldn't understand this, you might think that you could eat the fruit after 3 years, which is why Rashi brings it in the same explanation as a previous explanation, that it's from when you plant. So the first explanation deals with gavra, lachem, it's from when you plant. And the second explanation is dealing with the chefza, that even if you put away the fruit for 3 years, can't touch it. It's still prohibited. But if we wouldn't know that, we would have thought that it's simply an isser on the person, it's an isser gavra, and therefore it is time sensitive to the 3 years from when you planted. That during a certain amount of time, in the case of Pesach, 8 days, it's forbidden for a person to eat the chametz. Umemela, im hitznier la'achar shelo shanim arelim, v'lo bekitzer baralta marlos is pirish shelo shanim, and therefore the pasuk has to bring down the extra words to teach us about a case in which you hid those fruits away, or you set those fruits aside. And that's why Rashi doesn't say in very succinct fashion, I'm sorry, the pasuk doesn't say in more succinct fashion, "Va'araltem" or "Lasai" is pirish shelo shanim," but it doubles back with a second term, and the Rebbe is explaining that Rashi is illuminating that this gives us the 2 dimensions. Umizeh lamad Rashi she'orla beis inyanim, and from these words in the Torah, Rashi learns that there are these 2. No, I'm sorry, I got mixed up. When going backwards. We would have thought that it would have been permitted after 3 years, because the time of its impermissibility, the time of its prohibition has passed. Just like people ate pizza from the Eshta Oven, Matzeh Pesach. And this we learn from the word yihya, that it remains in the same state, that forever, after 3 years and after 6 years and after 9 years, You can't eat these fruits that grew during the first 3 years, gam la'achar shekalu hashalosh shanim, even after the 3 years came and went. Now we're going into the Chasidus. Seif Hey. Hatam hapnimi lechiluk shebein isuri gavra v'isuri chefza yesh loymar shatolui b'makar hachayos shel hadavar hane'asar. Al pi Chasidus, you could say that the difference between something that is prohibited on the person, isuri gavra, and something that is prohibited on the item itself depends on the source of the vivifying force, the chayus of the impermissible thing. Isurei chefza, when you're talking about something that is in and of itself impermissible, it's prohibited. In yanam shahachefetz mekabel chayus asura. What this signals is that this item is receiving its force of existence from a prohibited source. Migimel klipas hatmeas lagamre. From the 3 aspects of klipa that are completely impure. She'enan yecholes lihis'ales l'kedusha, and they cannot be elevated. That's what the word asur means, incarcerated. The netutei kedusha are so deeply mired and imprisoned in this item, they cannot be elevated, even if you make 600 brachas over it. V'lachein, harei hu chefza shel iser v'asur la'olam. So it's an impermissible thing, and it is prohibited forever. But isuri gavra, but when you say that something is prohibited to the person, in yanam, this signals shahachefetz mekabel chayus stam, that this item, whatever it might be, is receiving its vivifying force from a benign source, from a parif source, from stam, a source, miklipas noiga, from the klipa that is permeable, right? That it's possible for it to be elevated. It can be transformed and elevated. And therefore it is an item that is permitted. And heter means freed, like matir asurim, when you free those who are incarcerated, are imprisoned. There's nothing wrong with the thing. It's just the person is not permitted to eat it. Uperis arla hein iser chefza. And as we just learned, in the pears of arla, in the fruits of arla, it's not just a iser on the person. It's not just a iser on the gavra. It's a iser on the chefza. Because it gets those fruits get its force from klipas hatmeis, like the Alter Rebbe explains. So if that's the case, adayin dorish bir. So now we need to explain something. The tree itself is a permissible thing. And the fruits get their force from the tree. How is it possible that something that is asur, which means that's from the Gimel Klipas Atmeis, should be derived from, should flow forth from something that is mutar? How does that happen? If you would say that the fruit are always forbidden, then you'd be able to say that the aspect of the tree that is in charge of generation, that gives forth fruit, that aspect of the tree is stuck in Tumah, is mired in Tumah, is incarcerated. But once we know that after 3 years, the fruit are permitted, so that means that the corruptive aspect, that generation is not corrupted, generally speaking, because after 3 years, the fruit is allowed. So now we're back with our original question. How do you get something that is asur from something that is mutar? How does something that is tamei come out of something that is not? Vav. So the Rebbe answers this question in Seif Vav. V'yuvan, and we'll understand the hektim habir b'lashon Rabbeinu Hazaken Betanya. We'll understand this by prefacing with an explanation that the Alter Rebbe gives in Tanya. Where the Alter Rebbe treats forbidden foods like vegetation that is orla or grafting, because we're not permitted to graft two different species together. Shahakiyum v'chayus shalahem, and these are the words from Tanya that the Rebbe is going to parse, that their existence and their vivifying force, migimel klipas hatmeis, come from the 3 completely impure klipas. Umidayik bazeh chayk admor nishmasa etin. The Rashab explains on this. Asher ba'orla akloya kerem loy omar v'kiyum gufam. So the Rashab underscores that the Alter Rebbe didn't use the words kiyum, their existence, of gufam, their bodies, but the Alter Rebbe uses the word kiyum, their existence, v'chayus, and their their vivifying force and their life force, and that this is different shaloi kidaleil, and this is different legabi bali chaim hatmeim basurim b'achila, and this is different from how the Alter Rebbe writes about the impure animals that are forbidden. Shekasav Rabbeinu Hazaken shaloi rak hanefashes elegam kiyum gufam hu mikimol klipas hatmeis. About the forbidden animals, Alter Rebbe writes that kiyum gufam, the existence of their bodies, are from gimel klipas hatmeis. Mevaer sharei gufam de arla chulei tahar, and so the Rashab explains that the guf of arla is tahar. Now, the Rebbe says, seemingly this is not understood. Peiros arla heim harei asurim la'olam. We said already that no matter how much time passes, the fruit that grows in the first 3 years from when the tree is planted is prohibited. You could turn it into dried fruit, you could turn it into candied fruit, pickled fruit, salad. It does not matter. It is prohibited 90 years later. V'im came. And so if that is the case, kiyum gufam shalaper tzarich as migimel klipas hatmeis. So the existence of the body of the fruit would seemingly be coming from gimel klipas hatmeis lagamri, from the 3 completely unredeemable aspects of klipa. V'im mitzad zeh shaperes ba me'ilan shehu davar hetari gam chayes haperes ba me'ilan ba'al yadai. And if this is because the fruits come from a tree and the tree is permissible, but the life force of the fruits come from the tree. So how do we understand this? V'abir bazeh, the explanation is hachiluk shebein kiyum gufam levein kiyum v'chayus. The Rebbe parses the difference in the terminology that the Alter Rebbe uses in Tanya. About animals, the Alter Rebbe says kiyum gufam, the existence of their bodies. About orla, the Alter Rebbe says kiyum v'chayus. And what's the difference? Guf, body, the geshem hanivra, and the physical, material, corporeal aspect of the creation, nivrak pam achas, is created only once. Ume'oz ve'elach rak mikaimim es hametzius hakedemes. And from the point on, from when it's created, it just keeps reasserting its previous existence. And therefore, there is no difference from one time to another. There's not going to be any transformation in the existence of its body. It remains exactly the way it was created. Perhaps a larger form, a smaller form, but it is created once. Masha Enkain, but a contradistinction when the Alter Rebbe uses the word chayus hatzemeach, v'hadoimim, when you talk about the vivifying force of something that is growing, and even something that is inanimate, mischadeshes betmidus mechodash kimavor bekama mekaymas bepirish hamachadish betuvei bechol yom tamid maase berishes shebechol yom nimsheches chayes chadasha v'lachein yitachein shinu bechayes zeh. And this is explained in many places on the words hamachadish betuvei bechol yom tamid maase berishes shebechol yom, that every day there is brought down a new chayes. V'lachein yitachein shinui b'chayes zeh. Now, I have a question, and I don't know why that question did not hit me like a 2x4 between my eyes when I was preparing this. And I'm embarrassed because I understand about it semeach, that the vivifying force is constantly new. But why does he also bring down daimim here? And in which way is daimim different than an animal that is created once? In other words, if it's a mineral, if it's a rock, if it's a mountain, all these inanimate things seemingly also created once. I have to look into this unless somebody has an answer, and Be'ezras Hashem will share it on the chat.
Why is an animal different than a tzumeach? Why is the chayes once and that's it? And is a person also once? Are we like the animal?
In other words, your question is, everything has chayes. So either everything is the same, all four strata. And this is what the Mashitarg is saying. Didn't we learn that even a table is created every moment, a rock, a granule of sand? So what's the difference? It seems, no, so I thought I understood this based on the fact that only a tree gives forth fruit. That's different. So the chayas, the pulsating chayas, is a different one from what it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But I don't understand why the daimon is being
An animal also
Animals as children. We also give payers.
Right.
I'm just waiting.
Right.
I'm
That
waiting for
I understand. How Tzemeach, animal and people all have the same. That's understandable. I'm struggling with Tzemeach and daimon being compared here. That mischadesh is mitzvah mechadash.
I'm waiting for the end of the sikha. Maybe when we get to the Hamaisa who are Ikar, then maybe it'll fall into place. But you already learned that.
We've arrived at the end. We're 3 paragraphs from the end. I have to look into this. Vizel gama biur
Why changes. I think that I remember from my science classes from the 70s that daimim also changes. I mean, the atoms, the molecules, etc. Everything.
That's you know what? A person is different after 7 years. Every single cell in a person's body has been replaced on a 7-year cycle.
Right. No. So I'm trying to say about daimim.
Yeah.
Daimim is also changing.
That's true. And then so is animal, and so is
Maybe the common Rivky, you're just saying that it's stronger, that's all.
What?
Maybe the common denominator of Doimim and Sameach is that they don't move from place to place, and wherever they're created, that's where they, for the most part, stay. That's the only thing that seems to be the one thing that once they come, that's where they are.
Yeah,
But that is
Domem,
different what the Rebbe is saying.
sorry, Domem Tzemech are not in the same category right now. It's Domem and Chayes, and then you have Tzemech separately. So our question just becomes bigger because everything has Chayes. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Look, let's go back to the paragraph before. Guf v'geshem hanivra nivarak pamachas. The body, the corporeal aspect, is only created once. And it just continues to remain in its previous existence. So there's no difference from one time to another. That it should remember, what's our driving question? That it moves from a state of impermissibility to a state of permissibility. So the Rebbe wants to say, Masha Enkein Chayes Hatzemeach, but the vivifying force of the tree, let's take out Hadaimim for a minute, Mischadesh is bitmidas michadash. But the vivifying force, the Chayes of the vegetation, is constantly renewed. So now I'm struggling with where the word v'hadoimim, how that is in the same category. If it would have said Chayes hatzemeach v'chayes umedaber, we would understand. But what is the vivifying force that is changing, that is transmuting in something that is inanimate? Unless it's more simple than I think, and the Rebbe is just saying everything has a chayes that changes completely. Maybe that's all it means.
But then why make the distinction between Sameach and Doimim to anything else?
Maybe because that would be the least intuitive. So maybe it's like this: Masha Enkein, Chayes Hatzemeach, and maybe Vahadoimim, meaning like even the Doimim, Mischadeshes between us. I don't know.
Yeah, it goes together. The chayas of the tzomeach and the daimim. The comma is after the daimim, not after the tzomeach. They goes together. Both
No,
of them.
I understand, but the question is why only bring this example?
It doesn't seem like that because it seems like the Rebbe is bringing out something specific about Doimim and Sameach. When he says Dakregen, it seems like something is different about that, which it seems like I don't understand what it would be.
Yeah, okay.
I think
I
the
apologize. I don't know why I researched this earlier. The question just didn't.
I think what's different here is the Tzemech different than the Chayes and the Daimim. And I think that the body of a Tzemech takes on a totally different form. It's a tree, a bark, and then all of a sudden it has a body, it has a form of an orange. You know what I'm saying? So it's different, the fruit. Obviously, a Chayes and Medaber we have children, so it's like different bodies, but it's like the same idea. Even mineral, even something that's daimim, it takes on. It's not like a plant is different. That's what's different of a plant than a behemoth. What did you say? Chai. Right.
Yeah, but the Rebbe is not using the word chayes as
you look at
an
a
animal.
tree, you don't see. You look at a giraffe, so there will be a baby giraffe, or the giraffe it could grow taller. But you look at a tree, you don't see a cherry or an orange. So
But that
when you
only
talk about that,
underscores
it's
the question. That only underscores the question: in which way is the Rebbe putting daimim in the same category as sameach?
Rachi, I think you're reading the word
that.
chayes as an animal, not as the energizing force. Chayes here doesn't mean a chaya, an animal, I don't think.
Right. All right. It's something that I hope to find an answer to and share with everybody. And this explains the impermissibility, the prohibition on Orla. Haguf v'hageshem shel ha'ilon shehu davar tahar nishar b'taharasai. The body, the physical, material, corporeal aspect of the tree remains holy always. Because there's no change in its existence from what it was before. Masha inkain, in contradistinction, hachayus v'hakoyach shebe'emtza'usam matzmiach ha'ilon es ha'peres. But there is a vivifying force that the Alter Rebbe is pointing to by very subtly. Let's go back, changing from what he says about animals, where he says kiyum gufam, to what he says about forbidden vegetation, kiyum v'chayus. If we didn't already know that you have to learn Tanya with Rashi and Tosfos, now you see every single word weighed and measured. So the tree remains, but the chayas, the vivifying force, that is the energy through which the tree can generate fruits. And the fruits derive their vivifying force from the tree. So during the first 3 years from the planting, that vivifying force comes from Gimel Klipas HaTmeis. Not the tree, the force that gives life force to the fruit. And that's why the fruits become prohibited and remain prohibited always. But afterwards, but after 3 years from the planting, there is a new life force that comes down into the tree. Its fruit in the 4th year. Not only are they permitted, not only are they holy, ela adraba, but so much more so. Rashi says, Kodesh, they are holy, hilulim laHashem, so as to give praise to Hashem for their holiness. Not only are they pedestrian, they leave the category of impermissible to permissible. No, it's more. They become holy and they become something to give praise to Hashem about. Now, for some reason, what really hit me about this Sikha, and it's not the first time that the Rebbe has done this, of course, but I don't know, it seems so obvious here, was how the Rebbe showed that in the Pshuta Shel Mikra, the Pshat of Rashi, it aligns with Halacha. And it made me think of the Sikha, the famous Sikha, on the essence of Chasidus. In Yana Shel Taras Chasidus, on where the Rebbe takes Moeda Ani and he explains Moeda Ani on 4 levels, right? And there in that Sikha, in the 8th and the 9th Seifim, the 8th Seif, the Rebbe says as follows. He wants to explain what is Chasidus. Because people grapple with what is Chasidus. And specifically, what is the relationship between Chasidus and Kabbalah? The Rebbe says, the life and vitality which the teachings of Chasidus infuse into all aspects of the world issue from the vitality that Chasidus infuses into all the elements of Torah and are generated from that life force, for all the elements of creation are drawn from and are derived from Torah. The Rebbe says like this, in the Torah itself, there are 4 levels of interpretation: Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Said. And the teachings of Chasidus imbue each one with life and vitality. That is, in addition to the explanations which Chasidus gives to various subjects within all 4 parts of the Torah, which negates the common conception that Hasidus arose in order to explain only the esoteric part of the Torah. The Rebbe says people make the mistake of thinking that Hasidus arose to give us the soid, the hidden, the esoteric. The Rebbe says no. Hasidus infuses all four parts of the Torah, and in this way infuses every aspect of the world. But he says, in addition to this, the learning of Hasidus also infuses life into every subject which we learn in Torah. And then this subject lives in an entirely different manner with an essential life force. This vitality strikingly illuminates and profoundly deepens one's understanding of the idea. And the Rebbe gives an analogy to this concept of additional illumination and vitality in the revealed part of the Torah, and in a practical halacha is as follows. He brings down that the entire service of Yom Kippur is only acceptable when it's done by the Kohen Gadol. Now he says, in the same manner that the holiness of Yom Kippur is effective for the special avodas of Yom Kippur, it also affects the daily and extra Shabbos sacrifices that are in themselves connected to all the regular days of the year. But they too become sanctified through the sanctity of Yom Kippur through the Kohen Gadol. The same is true of Chasidus. Chasidus is called Shabbos Shabbosin. Those are the words that the Torah uses to describe Yom Kippur. Shabbos Shabbosin of Torah. And it likewise affects and influences all the parts of Torah. Because the four parts of Pardes are the four levels of the Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Chaya of the Torah. And Chasidus is the Yechida. Chasidus is the Yechida, the manifestation and revelation of the Yechida level, and it elevates all the other four levels of Naranach, as explained above. It's meiredik to understand this, and in a footnote to see that it's not the pshat that Chasidus is a parish on Kabbalah. It's a pshat that Kabbalah is a parish on Chasidus. And the authors here, Rabbi Greenberg and Shana Sarah Handelman, bring down to help explain this. Perhaps we can better understand this concept of that Kabbalah is an aspect of Chassidus through the following analogy. A physician uses the particular studies of biology, chemistry, anatomy, only to help him understand the essential life force of the body in order that he may be able to heal. The physician is not interested in anatomy in and for its own sake, but only insofar as it helps him further understand the nature of the body's existence. Similarly, Kabbalah is an anatomy, so to speak, while Chassidus is concerned with the essential comprehension of God's being and existence. Rebbe explains that Kabbalah is a gilui of Chassidus, a revelation of Chassidus. Anyway, it's a lot more to speak about here, but for some reason, just the way the Rebbe explained this Rashi and showed us how Rashi is speaking to this halacha, just made me think of the Sikha and what the Rebbe explains here about the different parts of Torah and how they're all vivified. Their energy comes from the Yechida, and that fills all the other parts of the Torah. Anyway.
Sorry, in there, what does it say Kabbalah is? Is it also part of Yechida or it's different?
No. It's nefesh.
It's Chaya?
It's Chaya. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating.
That was very special. Thank you very much. I
Sure.
like that.
Highly recommending, if I could get this to the camera, we're supposed to. Okay, I can't. It's called On the Essence of Chassidus. It's an English translation. failing. All right, on the essence of Chassidus.